Good afternoon. I'm Patricia Capella, Conference Manager for Clarion UX Food Shows, which produces several industry trade shows and conferences, including our upcoming Western Food Service and Hospitality Expo taking place August 25th through the 27th in Los Angeles, and the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Show in Orlando, September 15th through the 16th. We invite you to visit foodandbevshows.com for more information on all of our upcoming events. We appreciate you joining us today for our webinar, Elevating Your Coffee Program at Your Restaurant, presented by Todd Goldsworthy and Heather Perry of Klatch Coffee. With commitment and passion for specialty coffee, Todd and Heather always find a way to elevate their wisdom and skills to the next level. In this webinar, Todd and Heather will discuss a few easy steps you can take to elevate your coffee program and leave a lasting taste in customers' mouths. A few housekeeping notes before the presentation begins. All audience members are on listen-only mode, which means you are muted. We will be monitoring audience engagement on the dashboard and encourage you to participate by using the question pane. There will be time for questions and answers at the end of the session. This webinar, as well as others in our series, will be made available on our website in the coming week. Now, let me turn the program over to Todd and Heather. Todd?
Great, thank you so much. Let me just kind of take a quick moment to introduce myself and Heather. We are from Klatch Coffee. We are based in Rancho Cucamonga, if you're familiar with Southern California, which is just about 35 miles east from the convention center in downtown LA. Heather has been working in the coffee business since her family started Klatch 26 years ago. She is a two-time United States Barista Champion, and she's the current Specialty Coffee Association president that oversees here both U.S. and Europe. For myself, I have been in the coffee business about 19 years, and during that time I spent over 10 years in operations with Starbucks and the last around 7 years in B2B business wholesale with Klatch Coffee. I am also a two-time United States Brewing Champion. So Heather focused more on the espresso. I focus on that delicious filtered brewed coffee. And from there, now we're going to kind of just go into a little bit about this webinar. Coffee is no longer this endless breakfast diner cup, nor just an after dinner drink. Coffee is the new liqueur as the base for mocktails. Coffee is hot, coffee is cold. Coffee is a product that either begins or ends your customer's experience. So in this lecture, we'll discuss a few easy steps you can take to elevate your coffee program and leave a lasting taste in your customer's mouth. Today, we'll start by discussing easy steps to elevate that program. First, let's look at partnering with a local roaster. Finding the right roaster for your coffee is not about finding the right coffee itself, but finding a partner, someone that can help you improve the overall coffee program. A roaster that will work alongside you, that will support you and provide a win-win situation of growing together. Working with a roaster that has options available that fit your needs. So don't be stuck with maybe one coffee all year long. There should be an evolution through your coffee program. Local roasters are there to provide you with fresh roasted coffee. And your coffee is only as good as that raw product that you really start with. We look at local roasters, they provide you local products. And today there's just a lot of talk about that sustainability aspect of business. And does your coffee support all that? And does it support what you're doing on the rest of your menu? Do you bring in your lettuce from overseas? Do you bring your coffee in from overseas? Things just kind of think about and look at. When looking for a local roaster, not all local roasters around you are going to qualify to meet your needs. You're looking for someone who's going to partner with you in this journey and really be a consultant. They're going to be the coffee expert along the way. Ultimately, this is still your restaurant. This is your vision, your coffee program. And they are that coffee expert guiding you from your current state to your ideal state of serving coffee. So when choosing a local roaster, look at your needs and do they fulfill those needs? Some of those needs might be, let's just start with equipment. There's the two different ways of looking at equipment, owning or leasing. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 7 years now in wholesale, and it's completely different from an operations job. And one thing I found pretty early on in working business is that a lot of coffee shops, they own their equipment. A lot of restaurants, they lease their equipment. And typically you'll find that your equipment might be given to you by your roaster, but obviously that comes with a price. They're tackling on an extra $1, $2, depending on what you got from them, into that per pound price, because they have to offset their costs somewhere. So really looking at that, if it's affordable for you to purchase your equipment, I always recommend going down that road. The benefits of owning your equipment, let's just talk about tax write-off. Looking at that bottom line, that really helps you right there a little bit. Also, it allows you the freedom and flexibility of what coffee are you serving in your restaurant. If for some reason, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, you end up realizing that this wasn't the right choice of a local roaster. By owning your own equipment, you have that freedom and flexibility. You're not stuck in some kind of a contract, and you can start to shop around for the roaster that is right for you. And don't be afraid to do that. And don't be afraid to have that conversation with your roaster that these are your needs. And if they're not currently fulfilling them, give them a chance to see if they can maybe now find a way to really work within that. But if not, you have that flexibility and that ability to move on without that extra hassle of trying to figure out the equipment piece. Another one to look at is training. And that's going to differ a lot by what your program is. Heather's going to talk a little bit about that later on in here, but really kind of thinking about what makes most sense for your business. How much are you willing to invest in the time for the training? And what does your local roaster have to offer you around that training? Is it part of the cost of just buying coffee, or is there an added cost to that? And kind of start looking into that as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, consultation. Really, your roaster is there to walk alongside you in that journey and be that consultant. So at what level do you need consultation? Do you need support with equipment layout, or maybe just even choosing the right equipment? Going down that right, pricing your coffee, how looking at your cost matrix there, and what does that look like? Maybe you need to help with the right coffee selection for the type of restaurant you are. Maybe for the right clientele for what you're serving there that matches up. Consultation could be recipe development, helping you figure out what's the right recipe to serve. Whether that's just a recipe of brewed coffee and how much coffee do I put in when I just brew a batch of coffee. But it could be a lot deeper into that, as I mentioned earlier, mocktails. And Heather's going to get into mocktails a little later, but as you kind of explore that avenue, how much support can your local roaster give you in developing that recipe? And with that same patient, can your roaster help support you in keeping up to date with the trends in coffee, giving you options within there, as well as just innovating your menu to keep you on the forefront of what's happening? So these are all ways you can partner with a local roaster, questions to ask, and things to talk about with the roaster to determine who's the right roaster for you. Now let's just talk about those easy steps to improve. You've chosen a roaster, you found one, you got somebody who's local, and now you're looking to improve your value, improve that quality. But obviously, we all know that comes at a price. So your local roaster hopefully has a little bit higher quality you're moving into. Higher quality typically leads to a more satisfying beverage. When working with a local roaster, you should find out how fresh is the coffee you're receiving. When was it roasted versus when you will get it? Is it just sitting on a shelf for weeks, or is it roasted to order? Do they have a rotating menu allowing you to offer what is not only fresh roasted, but fresh in season? Coffee is seasonal, and that is something to really look at. Everywhere around the world, coffee is being picked at different times of the year, so it does arrive at the roaster at various stages throughout the year. So it gives you a chance to say, okay, right now, all the Central American coffees are coming into the United States. They're all fresh. There's some great coffees coming in. It allows you to keep freshness on your menu. But maybe, come a few months from now, you hear that all the African coffees are showing up, and you want to keep with that fresh movement. So great opportunity to have that conversation. Easy quality movement. Also looking at, do you want to serve single origins? Are you going to serve something that's easy and approachable, kind of like this Guatemala that you see here on the picture? Maybe a nice Colombian coffee, or an everyday drinking blend. But all of this is at what price? What's the bottom line, and what's going to flow through to your bottom line? So for some easy math, I'm going to just use a number. If you're currently paying, let's say, $7 a pound wholesale for your coffee, and you're using a 8-ounce per gallon brewed coffee, it's costing you just shy of 3 cents per ounce of that brewed coffee you're pouring. So a 12-ounce mug typically is filled with 11 ounces of brewed coffee, and that will cost you about 30 cents for that liquid. So your cost of goods sold on that is 30 cents. Now, you're moving to a higher quality roaster, somebody who's local and can give you all the support you're looking for. But they're telling you now it's going to cost you $9.50 a pound. That $2.50 per pound increase, and if we still use that same recipe, well, that's just shy of 4 cents per ounce. That 11 ounces of liquid you poured is costing you 41 cents. That 11 ounces is 11 cents more. Our difference of $2.50 per pound is costing you a penny an ounce in liquid coffee. But what can you charge now? Can you charge 50 cents more? $1? $2? Most could probably charge $1 more for the higher quality product you're serving, as well as for the concept that you are working with a local roaster and supporting another local business. Maybe you can charge more depending on the location you're at and what your customers are willing to pay, and that's something to talk to your roaster about that may be able to help guide you through that. We've also found, if you're offering refills, that people don't need refills as often when they get that more satisfying product. We work with a restaurant that was in Hollywood, and they have 2 locations, and they did exactly this. They went from a medium level quality coffee that was paying around $7 a pound, and they wanted to improve the quality. They wanted the quality of the coffee to match the quality of everything else they served. And when we start partnering up with them, they also do not want to charge more to their customers for that. So they decided this extra $2.50 a pound they were paying, they would eat that 11 cents. They would hope they could grow the sales of the whole restaurant to offset that just by having a great cup of coffee. They were a 24-hour-a-day business as well. So they started doing so. They found that over time, over the next 6 months, when they started looking at it, their sales of cups went up. They sold more coffee, but they went through less because they found that their refills actually went down. That satisfying cup filled what the customer was looking for in 1 cup instead of 2 or 3. All right, now that we've found good coffee, now what? Well, now you have to prepare it properly to really get your maximum impact. It does no good to have this delicious coffee that is watered down and has been sitting on hot plates for hours. So when it comes to making great coffee, you can make that happen with little investment by focusing on a few key areas. First is the element 1, your brewing method or your equipment, which we'll get into here next of some different options within that. Your coffee to water ratio, do you have a proper recipe happening? Your grind size. The 4th one is proper brewing technique or proper brewing operations. Your 5th element is good quality water, and your 6th element is an appropriate filtering medium. So we're going to focus on a few of these, which are really going to give you the most bang for your buck. So let's start off by talking about the brewing setup. Starting with brewing setup, you have 2 different real directions you can start to go. The first you can accomplish for under $1,000, and that is through French press service. In order to execute French press service, you need a grinder, some way to boil water, a scale, a timer, and of course, some French presses. This is a great option for restaurants. It ensures you can always have fresh coffee. It takes just 4 minutes from the time you add the water to the time it can be poured into the cup for a customer. You can also, in this, serve it tableside, which can deliver a much higher price point. It doesn't require investment in any kind of electrical or plumbing or any major equipment. But now, maybe you're more of a breakfast location and you go through a much higher volume. You may need to invest in more than just a French press. And if that's the case, and setup you see here on the right might be more of what you're looking for. You can see there are no glass decanters on heating plates, but instead these thermal pots that also have sensors telling you how fresh the coffee is, as well as how full the pot is. You also have a nice deep brew basket, allowing you to use enough coffee to brew anywhere from a half a gallon at a time up to 1.5 gallons at a time, depending on your business at different times of the day. Upgrading your equipment, something like this, allows you to brew a cup of coffee that gets your customers to stop and say, wow, that's a really nice cup of coffee. And you don't have to be serving some fancy single origins. You don't have to brew on pour overs like V60s with a staff of people who just do coffee. You don't have to hire a full-time barista. By simply brewing a good cup of coffee, you can really begin to stand out. Then there's the coffee to water ratio. Well, this is basically the recipe. The way you ensure that you're achieving that really nice cup of coffee is to make sure you're using the right amount of coffee for how much water you're using. All of the right grind size and measuring the TDS, or total dissolved solids, of your coffee, you can make sure you're brewing to what's called gold cup standards. Now, if you're looking at this chart and it's kind of giving you a headache, you've never heard the words TDS or gold cup standard, the good news is you should never have to make sure that you are brewing within gold cup standard. Because you're working with should be your partner. They're your companion in your coffee program, and they should be coming out, helping you dial in your equipment, ensure that the coffee is good to go. When you're talking to your coffee roaster, an easy interview question is, what are you going to do to ensure I am brewing within gold cup standards? If they look confused, they're probably not someone you should trust with your coffee. And grind size. So everyone knows once you peel a banana, the damage is done. There's no undoing that action for the oxidation of the banana. I have 2 kids, and I cut them up apples in the morning often, and as soon as I cut up that apple, the exact same thing happens. The oxidation has started. The countdown has begun. And the same is true of coffee. Once you grind the coffee, there are no takebacks. The countdown is on to use that coffee up, and does it need to be used within 5 minutes? No, not within 5 minutes, but it should be used the same day, and ideally within an hour. Think about how long that takes for that banana to oxidize. That's exactly what's happening with your coffee. You just can't see it as easily as a banana. And water. So bad water makes coffee bad, period. Good, properly filtered water enhances quality coffee. So you can talk with your local roaster about your water, and that will definitely help. But ultimately, do you have a water system in your restaurant for drinkable water? And is that being used to brew coffee? If yes, you have a great starting point. But do you want to take that further? Maybe you're here in our area in Southern California, where we have our water source change very regularly throughout the year. We do not have the best water, especially for brewing coffee. Well, that's where you should talk to your local roaster. And they can have recommendations on systems for your area that make sense to improve your water, but also match their coffee. Depending on your water source, this could be a small investment of a few $100s, or if your source of water changes regularly like ours, gets a lot of buildup already inside it, or simply you just have bad water, you may need a few $1,000 investment in an RO system. There are big ranges for water that make sense for most coffees, but your roaster knows their coffee and the right minerals in the water that it takes to showcase the brew. So with that, I'm going to now pass this along to Heather, and she's going to kind of take you through what is happening right now in coffee. Heather?
All right, so one of the things I think you have to realize is that the game is definitely changing when it comes to coffee around the world, particularly in food environments. You know, it used to be if I wanted a nice coffee, I would go to a coffee shop. And if I wanted a nice breakfast or a nice lunch, I would go to a restaurant or a diner. But those lines are starting to become much more blurred as coffee shops have really elevated their food game much quicker than restaurants have elevated their coffee game. So what stands out to you in the pictures that I have kind of above there? What do you imagine those places consider themselves? Believe it or not, both of these places call themselves coffee houses. They both serve food, but the coffee is what they are actually known for. And I say that because the picture on the left is from a company called Bluestone Lane. If you're familiar with them, they excuse me, they've gotten some major expansion going on in the U.S. right now. And they actually have a few different footprints as to what they do. So they have everything from a full sit-down restaurant to a quick grab-and-go cafe. And the key is there's one common core between all of the footprints that they have, and that is the coffee. That's what they're known for. They might have more food or less food. They might add alcohol at certain locations, but it's the coffee that is the mainstay of their business. See, coffee shops don't just do coffee anymore. And if I'm looking for a nice breakfast or lunch or even brunch perhaps, for many people, that coffee is going to be the deciding factor. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Aussie movement. We've really seen a lot here in the U.S., and it's definitely changed our expectations. So the next picture here is an example of a coffee house here in LA. Many of you might pass one of them. It's called Go Get 'em Tiger. If you come to the food show this week, you'll see them. They've got a few different locations. See, and they are more of a traditional coffee house. You walk in, you see a posted board menu. And one of the things that you'll notice here is this menu for a coffee house is 2/3 food and 1/3 coffee. Now, Go Get 'em Tiger is actually owned and operated by 2 barista champions. So these are 2 guys that they could make a mainstay on just doing coffee. They clearly know coffee. They know how to do it well. And yet, even for them, they recognize the importance of giving people a more complete offering. And if restaurants want to maintain their customer base, they're going to have to start taking that same attitude with their coffee. So Todd's given us a great starting point for having good coffee, but how do restaurants really elevate their coffee at the same level coffee has elevated their food? There's a few different options that we're going to run through here. One is really simple, coffee on tap. You've seen it at Starbucks has done a lot with them. A lot of specialty places have as well. You've seen it through either nitro, which you see that picture of on the right. You also can have cold brew on tap. You can do teas and kombuchas on tap. But let's focus on coffee for a minute. So if you look at that picture on the left, we've got 5 or 6 different tap handles there. And the tall one that stands out, black and blue, that's actually not a beer at all. That is a nitro coffee. So many roasters are starting to produce coffee in kegs. So for you as a restaurant, it is actually 0 additional cost. You already have the taps lined up. You switch out 1 beer for a nitro, and you're now putting yourself out there for an entirely new clientele. The Sober Curious movement is definitely starting to gain more traction, and people are looking for different options. So this is a really easy way for you to offer something totally unique that elevates your coffee game that requires little to no investment on a restaurant's part. Again, you aren't having to put in any new equipment. You most likely already have a tap system there. So all you're really your menu for a totally new offering. Additionally, having something like nitro tells your customer base that you take your coffee seriously, that you take your coffee game seriously. Now, the other end of the spectrum for this is adding espresso. This is not low investment for either money or time. And my advice to you is if you're going to add espresso, only do it if you're going to do it right. You know, the nice thing about some of the things that Todd talked about earlier is you can make them happen for relatively both low dollar investment and low time investment. Espresso is neither one of those. Adding espresso to elevate your coffee game can be anywhere from a $5,000 investment to a $30,000 investment. But the trick is once you've got that equipment in there, it is only as good as the people handling it. You know, Todd was showing us a French press program earlier, and the nice thing with something like a French press is it's actually very little training. You can have your roaster come in with a very simple recipe card that anybody could read and then execute with no additional training. You have a hot water kettle, it will say grind 30 grams of coffee on the grind 3 setting of the grinder. Add 2 cups hot water, set the timer for 4 minutes, plunge and serve. And as simple as that, somebody could read the card and execute that French press. You cannot take that same approach when doing espresso. So that's one thing that I think people take for granted is how easy it is to add espresso in. Now, it doesn't have to be a large footprint. You can get away with a fairly small footprint. You can, for most dinner restaurants, something like a single group machine will allow you to do espressos, macchiatos, cappuccinos to your dessert menu really nicely. But it's things like that where people can get themselves in trouble by serving a really bad espresso, by serving an espresso that's 3 or 4 ounces instead of what it should be, which is like an ounce of liqueur, about a 1 ounce beverage, or by not having crema on it, by not having these beautiful dark marks on it, they'll miss out on that. Or a cappuccino that has that really dry, bubbly foam. It looks like you essentially took that dishwater bubble in the back and scooped it on top. That doesn't do you any favors either. You're better off not doing espresso than doing it poorly. So if you want to add espresso, how do you do it properly? Well, you have to be realistic about what you can put into it. So where is it going to go? Is it going to go in the back of house or going to go in the front of house? I think that makes a really big difference on the aesthetics of the equipment that I would want to do. Who's going to be making the coffee? I think sometimes restaurants put this in and don't necessarily tackle that, and you give it to a bartender and maybe they don't feel that that's their job. Maybe you give it to a server and they don't want to do that. Maybe you put it in the kitchen. It's the dessert chef's job and they don't really want to do it. So you've got to find somebody who really enjoys doing it. People in the back of house do things because they love them, right? You have a pastry chef because they love pastries. So whoever's going to be handling your coffee program, you need to make sure that they really do love coffee. I think that's a really important part of it. And then you do need to have somebody who's going to be in charge of the program day in and day out. Not an owner who's going to kind of come in every few weeks and try the coffee and check on it, but somebody who's there during the service time that's invested in making sure that things are being handled properly and that things are going out looking and tasting like you want them to. You also want to make sure that your roaster can help support you in this, because the reality is we all have turnovers in these positions. So if you have turnover every 6 months, can your roaster provide you training every 6 months? Most, good roaster will be able to support you through training either at their facility or at yours, one of the two, but you should have some sort of support system there for your espresso program. Now, the next way that you can really elevate your coffee game is making the coffee the star. And this is just visually. I talked about whether you're going to put your espresso machine in the front of the house or the back of the house. These are 3 really good examples of coffee looking really clean and sleek and nice and being the star in the front of the house. So the picture there on the left, the bigger one, is Proud Mary out of Portland. And you can see just a little bit of that blue popping out, and that's their espresso machine. It sits just below the counter, but if you're sitting at the bar, you can see everything that's happening. It doesn't put a mess front and center. It's not noisy, but it shows you that coffee is what they're about, that coffee is what they do. And that's the great thing about their setup there. Anybody who's sitting at the bar can see all of the drinks being made for everybody that goes out. They don't do any alcohol here, so literally where you would have all of your alcohol, they have turned into their coffee bar. If you are a heavy breakfast or brunch type place, this is a beautiful type of setup. In that top right corner, you have a more traditional alcohol bar, but then you can see that white equipment where the gentleman's working. That's that grinder right there. I'm sure most of you don't think of coffee equipment as being white, but I think something that the coffee industry has done a really good job on the past couple of years is making some beautiful equipment that you want front and center, that you want your customers to be able to see. Because again, it makes a statement of, I take my coffee seriously, and that's going to help to build that trust with that consumer. I'm one of those really obnoxious people. When I go to breakfast, I bring my coffee with me because I just assume the coffee's not going to be good. But when I'm in certain areas, when I'm looking at where I'm going to go, I actually will read reviews on the coffee to pick where I'm going to go. So, pictures like this help me just tell a story about the experience that I'm going to get. And then just on that bottom right picture, this is a little bit of a combination. It's definitely not front of house, the espresso machine there. You can see the blue cups are on top of the espresso machine. It's a little more hidden, but it still is front and center. It's still in the front of house. You can still see it when you walk in, and you can still see your coffee coming out nice and fresh. So those are kind of 3 different examples of making the coffee the star simply by where you're placing the equipment and the type of equipment that you're putting out. One of the other things is obviously if your equipment's going to be front and center and you have all this beautiful equipment, you need to make sure it looks really nice. And that means not having milk on your steam wands and coffee grounds all over your counter, chocolate sauce dripped everywhere, really simple things like that. We didn't talk about what an espresso menu would look like per se, but what you will see is that when it comes to menus like this right here, even with espresso, it's actually a really simple menu that you can do. So here's 2 different examples of how you can help to showcase your coffee simply through your menu. So the one on the right has the espresso at the top. So espresso, long black, cappuccino, and a latte or a flat white. 4 really simple drinks, no additional ingredients needed, just espresso and milk. So when you're going to do a few ingredients like that, you obviously need to make sure that they taste delicious. But going along with that, they also have a pour-off for coffee menu. I like this because I think it makes it really visual for people about how their coffee is going to come to them. And so I like this menu. I think sometimes in the coffee industry, we probably take for granted that people know what we're going to talk about, but people understand what we're talking about when they don't. And so I think, especially in a restaurant setting, making coffee really approachable and high-end is a great way to kind of combine the two. So I like the way on the right how they divide their espresso and their pour over there. So they've got their espresso and then their pour over at the bottom. Here you can see they're offering 4 different coffees. And if you look at the way they talk about the coffees, they just kind of draw you in. It doesn't say something simple like cup of coffee or French press of coffee. They start with kind of what they call the coffee, so the name of the farm of the coffee. And then from there, they tell you the country of the coffee and then the processing. And finally, what it's going to taste like. So it's a great kind of journey for the customer as they're going through your menu, kind of seeing what they want to do. Obviously, dessert pairings, if you're a dinner restaurant, having a dessert recommendation for all of these coffees would absolutely be something that I would do. Now on the left here, they do it a little bit differently with a varietal showcase is the way that they describe it there. Hacienda Sonora. They don't even tell you the country until you start reading that these 3 coffees are all going to come from Costa Rica. And from this one farm in Costa Rica, from Hacienda Sonora, there's 3 different varietals that they're showcasing. And the way that I kind of describe varietals is varietals from coffee are the same as like varietals for apples, right? So imagine you have a tasting of a Honeycrisp apple and a Fuji apple and a Pink Lady apple. That's literally what they're laying out for the consumer to try right there. And so they talk a little bit about what each varietal is. They talk about the tasting notes. And then they actually take it to the next level. They offer each coffee 3, they call it 4 ways because that would be whole bean, but as an espresso, as a pour over, as a cold brew, and then as whole bean to take home. But what I really like about it is that last one where you can get the flight of all 3. So you can get all 3 at a time and literally have a tasting menu of coffee. And I think that's such a nice way to explore coffees. You know, they did it with, I think, doing one farm and highlighting 3 different varietals is really unique to show how in such a small locale coffee can change so much. But you could also easily do it with 3 wildly different coffees, with a Sumatra and an Ethiopian and a Colombian. You know, you could also do it. I know if my husband and I went out to dinner and there was somewhere that had like a mini dessert trio paired up with like a coffee tasting, we would get that every single time. I think we don't even need my husband. I would get that by myself, actually. It could be full desserts and I would still get it. But I mean, that would be so up my alley for something like that. But here's a great way where you can really start to showcase your coffee through the way that you present it on your menu. And then with the service, I mean, the coffee that you serve, you've built it up, right? You've had this beautiful equipment that's front and center. You've had this menu. You're presenting a really interesting concept. You have to follow through with the way that you serve the product. If you're going to do espresso and milk, you need to do latte art. I just think at this point, at this day and age, you know, if it doesn't have a to-go lid on it, I pretty much am going to expect it to have latte art on it. And that's kind of my standard for coffee. And I think that's for most places. You know, if I'm at a nice dinner, I would expect my coffee to have latte art on it. And so, again, that's something your roaster should be able to work with you on. While tulips might be, you know, take a little bit of time, something like a simple heart. In one training, I can get almost everybody to pouring a really nice heart, and they can walk away and go do that in a restaurant type setting. So it's not asking too much. It's literally being willing to invest that little bit of time, though, in order to do it properly. Another really simple thing in that same picture is the different glassware that the coffee is being served in. You know, I think something that we've done with coffee is we talk a lot now about coffee being an art and a craft. And I think getting away from just, you know, kind of boring white ceramics talks a lot about your coffee program as well. It doesn't have to be this colorful, but I think having something that matches your brand as a whole really does help to separate your coffee out a little bit. So I like investing in some sort of different ceramics that kind of show I've invested in my coffee program. I didn't just take whatever was off the shelf and go with it and say, give me a dozen white. I went and put some time into sourcing it because I thought it would really create a good experience. So little things like that tell me as a consumer that you're taking your coffee seriously. On the bottom left there, you can see where they serve the coffee. They serve it in a wine glass there, but they serve it with a great tasting card. I think you have to determine, you know, for your wait staff what they can and can't talk about and what you do and don't want to put on your menu. But even if my menu is really simple, I think being able to then serve the coffee with a supporting card that talks more about it is a great way to help just kind of continue taking me through that journey. So, if you're looking at these menus saying, man, I don't have that much space on my menu to put all this information. If you're able to offer 2 or 3 different coffees and you're able to, with each of them, just maybe pick on the tasting notes, but then when you serve the coffee, to allow me to engage with the story as much or as little as I want to as a consumer, I think that's another great way to kind of elevate your service. And then finally, you can take it really to the extreme. This is at 11th Madison in New York. They do cart service for their coffee. I remember growing up as a little kid, and we were part of a country club, and we would always get the Caesar salad, and they would make it tableside, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. And they're doing that same approach, but with their coffee service, which I think is an amazing way to do it. Really kind of walking people through the experience. They use a siphon method there, which is it's definitely a more involved method. And if you're going to do siphon, there's no point in doing it if you're not going to do it tableside, because it is such a beautiful show when you do it. So that would be kind of the high-end way of serving your coffee. And then finally, another option that I think is so important if you're going to elevate your coffee game, really taking it to the next level, taking it beyond just your traditional coffee drinks with coffee mocktails. I mean, this can be done so many different ways, and you can see these are just as beautiful as any other cocktail kind of going out. So the one on the top right there, that's actually done with nitro. So you can take something like your nitro and use it as the base for other mocktails and cocktails. Cold brew, I had mentioned earlier, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the term cold brew. Most roasters that produce cold brew also make a cold brew concentrate. It's how we usually start with it. And that concentrate can be the base for so many great drinks. I mean, honestly, doing something like some cold brew concentrate and some bitters and some sort of sweetener can create you a great something similar to like an old fashioned, if you will. Think of it something like that. Just a great way to kind of elevate your coffee and create an entire menu based off of it. If you are doing any sort of brunch, to not have these coffee mocktails is really just leaving money on the table. These are a great way to really elevate your coffee game and showcase coffee in an entirely new and unexpected way to your customers. All right, now I'm going to hand it back to Todd.
All right. So as we continue in this conversation, take it to the next level, one other thing I wanted to kind of really focus here on is the exclusivity and customization options. Limited release coffees. Maybe as you start to really partner with a roaster, as I said, everything kind of builds throughout the year, and things should be continually evolving. And one of those options is maybe it's a customized blend. Creating a blend that really does match the flavor profile of your restaurant and really kind of complements the food that you are already serving, and something that works well for you. Maybe that's getting more of an exclusive micro lot. This is something we're working with a roaster, and you say, hey, I want something that just I serve. Can we work together on sourcing a coffee that's just for my restaurant? And an El Salvador coffee in a very special and unique way. High-end service really does deserve high-end coffee options, whether that's maybe especially processed coffee. One of the trends right now in coffee processing is carbonic maceration, or also the anaerobic fermentation. And these are just super exotic ways of processing coffee that changes the flavor profile in a very unique way. There's also, if you pay attention to the news, the super exotic Panama geisha, the serious beans, as it says right there. Or maybe it's just something distinctly floral Ethiopian. Something that when people say, well, coffee just tastes like coffee, you can serve them something that goes, wow, I taste blueberry in this coffee. This doesn't taste like any other coffee I've ever had. So finding something special and exclusive can really help your restaurant stand out from the rest. So with that, we'd like to open up to questions. We're going to pull up the chat box here and see kind of where we're at with this, and kind of go from there for any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Todd and Heather. That was a really great presentation, and I definitely appreciate you sharing your expertise with our audience. We do have a few questions. First thing, I just want to remind everyone, because we had a couple of questions asking if this webinar will be available. It will. You will actually get an email with a webinar link, and it will also be available on our foodandbevshows.com. So you can look out for that. And I also want to mention, if you're attending the Western Food Expo, you can catch Heather and Todd. They will be doing a presentation on Tuesday, August 27th at 3 p.m. Or you can also visit them at their booth, which is 1741 on the Coffee Fest side. And be sure to check out all the education program on both Coffee Fest and the Western Show. With that, our first question we had was, where can you find the gold standard chart for maintaining TDS ratios?
Yeah, I can answer that. It's actually an easy Google search. It's actually called, that chart itself is called the Coffee Brewing Control Chart. So if you just do a Google search of Coffee Brewing Control Chart, you'll be able to find that exact chart itself. And be able to download it. There should be some nice information there around it. You can also, if you're having a hard time finding it, feel free to email me. I have some PDF versions and can kind of help walk you through how to walk through that as well.
Awesome, thanks. The next question, I believe Heather kind of answered this already, but I'll just read it. It was, I have an espresso machine we purchased for our restaurant. Any suggestions on training my employees on ways to make better foam and shapes on cappuccinos and other drinks?
So there's a few different ways. One, I would say start with your roaster. They should be able to easily come in and help you out with that. If you don't have a roaster who you can work with on that, there's actually some great YouTube videos that you can do in regards to that. And then there's also a lot of people who do classes around. I mean, we do classes for ourselves. You can look through the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, and something like their Intro to Espresso is a great way to start, or Barista Foundations class is a great way to start with some kind of key notes about that. The other thing is, if you've never done any formal training, like going to an SCA class or something to that effect, if you yourself do it, it will give you some great tools and you will be better able to train your staff with as well. So those are kind of 3 different levels that you can go with to get more information on that.
Thank you. The next question we have here, what should someone be looking for when finding a local roaster to partner with?
Yeah, I think as we kind of go back to what I talked about a little bit at the beginning there, it's really just finding one that fits your needs. Kind of have a list of questions you're looking to ask, but you're looking for somebody who is a coffee expert. They are, they are able to provide you with those areas. So whether it's somebody like who just asked the question about the espresso, if somebody asked, if you went to your roaster and said, hey, we are doing espresso. We are looking for training on latte art and improving our espresso quality and these things. Those are great questions to start asking. And as I said, if your roaster's like, yeah, we just are unable to provide that. It's not what we do. It might be time to start looking for a different roaster. But asking that question, because that's something that is your need. And not every, I always tell people, it's like, us as Clutch Coffee, we are not the roaster for everybody. We can't fit all the needs that everybody has, but we do fit the needs of certain people. And if someone came to us and said, we need latte art training, as you heard from Heather, she can teach that. She will train that. We have trainers. Like, that is a need we can fulfill. So it's just finding the right need, what your needs are, and finding the right roaster to fit those needs.
Thank you, Todd. The next question we have is, what is the best resource for signature beverages?
I would say the best resource for signature beverages, it depends on exactly where you're going with it, but one, I love to use bartenders. I love to figure out what's going out in the bar scene, and kind of what ingredients they're using, what flavor profiles they're connecting with. The next place would be your chef. What ingredients are they using? How are they using them? Going to a chef and saying, hey, I really want to use fig. What do you have? How can you break down figs for me? What can I do with figs? Those are 2 different ways to do it. And I think they both bring a totally different skill set to how it kind of comes together. And then finally, I will tell you this, you have to make a lot of bad drinks before you can make good drinks. Signature drinks are a big part of what I do, and I've made undrinkable beverages, and I've made a lot of like, okay, beverages, and then that gets to like, this is what I really love kind of beverage. So a lot of it is to experimenting with different things, experimenting with different ingredients, different coffees. I think sometimes when people are looking at signature beverages, they just don't always pick the right coffee for what they're trying to match up as well. So making sure that you understand the coffee that you're using, and then kind of finding some different flavor profiles that can go with that as well. And then the last thing I would say is working with your roaster again. Your roaster should be able to give you some options. One of the things that we think definitely helps to give us a different advantage when talking to our consumers is we have retail stores. So we do a lot of the things that we talk about because we're doing them in our retail stores. So it definitely gives us a different perspective than somebody who does not work in retail. And because of that, we feel like it gives us just kind of a different look at the coffee scene as a whole.
Great, thank you. This next question, this is a great question. What's the best coffee podcast? And are there any other media available to stay up to date on coffee trends?
Ooh, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
I'll recommend too that I listen to coffee podcasts, and I'll see if Heather has others. Actually you have to look at what the name is. But there's two guys named Chris Baca and Jared Truby. They own a coffee roasting company in Santa Cruz called Cat and Cloud Coffee Roasters, and they have a podcast where they are constantly just kind of talking about things that are happening in their lives around coffee, and it's just an easy, approachable way to listen to them work through all the issues they work through, because typically the stuff they're dealing with in their coffee shops are things that other coffee shops or restaurants are dealing with, whether it's talking about labor, whether it's talking about different kinds of coffee, it's talking about equipment. There's a lot of things like that. There's also another coffee podcast called Keys to the Shop. And Keys to the Heather's nodding her head yes, she's like, these are the two I would have said. But Keys to the Shop is he's based out of Louisville, I believe. His name is Chris DeFario, and Chris has just a whole lot of experience in coffee. But what he does that's great is he brings other coffee people on, and he pretty much just kind of does question and answers with them. So it's not just Chris's viewpoint and Chris's perspective, but he really brings in a wide range of perspective on various topics. He listens to what people say, hey, I'd really like to know more about this and know more about that. And he looks for somebody who's an expert in that area that he can bring on the show and have conversations with.
Yeah, the one that I would add probably is the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association. They do a really good job of putting talks and lectures from their expos and so on, and from different events that they're doing. They do a good job of posting those. So I would also look at those. They do a nice job hosting stuff as well. And Cat and Cloud, just Google Cat and Cloud podcast. It will come right up.
Great, thank you. The next question is on competitions. What type of competitions are available, and what's the best way to prepare for them?
Oh, there's so many.
There are so many. I mean, this weekend with the Western Food Show, there's two. There's a latte art competition, and there's also a cold brew competition. And those are, the latte art is obviously more of an individual competition, whereas the cold brew is more of a company competition. We're actually hosting in October through the SCA, the U.S. qualifying preliminary competition. And there's 5 different competitions that we'll be hosting. One is coffee and good spirits, so coffee and alcohol combined. One is a barista competition, preparing espresso and cappuccino. One is brewer's cup competition, preparing brewed coffee. One is a roasters competition, so roasters will roast coffee and bring it and present it. And the last one is cup tasters, where it's like a triangulation. So finding the odd cup is the best way to describe it. And all of those are amazing competitions. You literally say, what do I do on a daily basis, and kind of pick and what am I interested in? That's where you focus on. You can find a bunch of information about those. And the way you get in, if you wanted to get involved in any of those competitions, a prelim is the way that you do it, because meaning you don't need to invest a ton of time into getting different glassware and different things like that. Read the rules, make sure you understand those, sign up. If you're also interested and kind of don't know what you'd be getting involved in, judge or volunteer at a competition. It gives you the behind the scenes. It helps you answer all of your questions. So you know the expectations. You can learn so much through judging these competitions that you can take back with you, not just for the competition, but, oh, wow, this is how people are evaluating coffee. Oh, this is what a good espresso tastes like. I mean, you can learn so much through judging. So I highly recommend, if you're brand new to it, judge or volunteer at a competition is a great way to do it. There's another roasting competition called Golden Bean Competition taking place in Nashville in October that we'll be entering, and we've won a few times. Those are just a few off the top of my head that are all coming in within the next 2 months. But with any competition, I'm always a huge fan of just get out there and do it. You know, read the rules, talk to somebody who's done it before. There's lots of different resources for that. And if nothing else, judge or volunteer, and that's the best way to kind of immerse yourself in it to prepare yourself for the following year.
I'm going to add one more thing also. Is in most local communities, especially if you're near a bigger city, a lot of the coffee communities put on what are called Thursday night throwdowns. And so those are, typically they are latte art throwdowns. So they're latte art head-to-head competitions. So it's a great opportunity to find out if there's a latte art competition happening in your area. You can kind of Google search, coffee TNTs, latte art throwdown, something like that in your area. Try to even ask some local coffee shops if they know about them, and they can help guide you to where that's being posted or about it. And it's a great opportunity. They're very, very laid back, great opportunity to relax, hang out, get to know other people in coffee, and it's just a nice starting point as well.
Great, thank you. Sounds like there's a lot. We have our last two questions. The first one, what is the most creative coffee espresso drink menu you've ever seen?
Let us think about that for a minute and give us the next question.
Okay. The next question, what's the best website you suggest for coffee recipes and other creative ideas? I think we kind of touched upon that a little bit before, but.
Yeah, there's not one website I would use for any sort of coffee recipes. I honestly just Google things, and that's the best way to do it, because there's not one website that has lots of different coffee recipes, in my opinion. As far as the most creative espresso drink, and that is tough. A lot of what you see in competition does not always translate to a cafe. There's a lot of times a disconnect between there as far as what I've seen executed in competition versus what I've seen executed in cafes as well. But off the top of my head, oh man, this is tough.
I can always give you a little time to think about it, and we can include it in our email when we send out the webinar if you need more time.
Yeah, let's do that. Probably, some of the fun ones that I've seen, and this is by no means the most creative, but some fun ones that I've seen done in cafes really well. Coffee in a donut is something that got a little popular there for a minute, and so essentially you make donut milk. So you soak donuts in milk and then strain out the donuts, and you've got this sweet yeasty milk that just blends beautifully with coffee. So I always think that's actually a really delicious espresso drink. Madcap out of Michigan, I want to say they do a fantastic Negroni. It's not a Negroni at all because there's no alcohol in it. It's all coffee. But they do a fantastic coffee version of a Negroni that I just thought is super creative and super well executed as well. So those are two examples that kind of come to the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And if you don't mind, we actually have one question that just came in. If we could squeeze one more in.
Sure.
This is asking about if there are any YouTube channels out there that people should focus on for coffee.
Most of the YouTube ones are going to focus a little bit more on latte art, I think, for the most part. Chris Baca, Cat and Cloud, they do some great things on YouTube as well that are really nice. So I would probably look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of searching YouTube for the topic you're looking to learn more about. Is going to be your best bet.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. Again, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all of this with our audience. Again, I just want to remind everyone, keep your eyes out for the email. You will get a copy of the webinar, and that will also be available on our foodandbevshows.com website. And if you're coming to the Western Food Expo, please make sure to see Heather and Todd. They'll be speaking again. That's Tuesday, August 27th at 3 p.m., and their booth is 1741. Thanks so much for your time today. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.